The title of my book, Empire of AI, is a nod to this argument that I make in the book that companies like OpenAI really need to be thought of as new forms of empire. And this argument is based on 4 parallels that I talk about within the book between empires of AI and empires of old. The first one is that empires lay claim to resources that are not their own, but they reinterpret the rules to suggest that those resources were always their own. So these empires of AI, they scrape the data on the internet and they say it's totally fair game, it's in the public domain. But of course, the people who put that data on the internet, they didn't do it with informed consent, understanding that their data would be taken. Also refers to the intellectual property that they take from artists and writers, and they say this is totally fair use. But artists and writers are now pushing back, saying, wait a minute, we didn't ever consent, and we're not getting compensated for this. The second feature, empires of AI, they also engage in an extraordinary amount of labor exploitation. And this refers not just to the fact that they contract workers around the world, especially in the global south or in economically vulnerable communities, to do some of the most troubling work in the AI development supply chain, such as content moderation. It also refers to the fact that their technologies are inherently labor automating. So OpenAI's definition of what they call artificial general intelligence is highly autonomous systems that outperform humans in most economically valuable work. So they say the quiet part out loud by saying that they're ultimately trying to create a technology that will do things that humans usually do for money. So it's labor exploitation on the way in and it's labor exploitation on the way out. The third feature of empire is that empires monopolize knowledge production. In the last 10 years, we've seen, because these companies are so resource rich, they can easily pay over $1 million in compensation to the top AI researchers in the world. So we've seen most AI researchers shift from working in academia and independent environments to working for these companies. And effectively, what that's done to the scientific understanding of how AI works and what its limitations are is what you would imagine would happen if all of the climate scientists in the world were suddenly being bankrolled by oil companies. It is not an accurate perception at all. The last feature of empires is that they always participate in this narrative that there are evil empires and there are good empires in the world. And they, the good empire, need to engage in all of this resource extraction and labor exploitation in order to fortify themselves and be strong against the evil empire. And I document throughout the book that OpenAI changes who the evil empire is based on what's convenient. So in the early days, the evil empire was Google. More recently, the evil empire has become China. And ultimately, there's this idea that if the evil empire wins, humanity is going to go to hell. But they, as the good empire, if you just give them unfettered access to all of these resources, they will civilize the world, bring progress and modernity to humanity, and humanity will finally have a chance to go to heaven.
Is there a central place where collective action can gather around a common, almost set of human rights in the face of this AI revolution?
And I think not necessarily a central place, more of a distributed many, many places. Okay. You know, if you're a parent, you are a parent.
I am a parent.
The fact that your school is implementing certain technologies that are going to affect your kids, like build a parent group or a parent-teacher coalition and be like, hey, let's actually talk about this before you start, using facial recognition on my kid, before you start turning my kid into a QR code. Let's actually set some guidelines around what kinds of technologies we do want to use and don't want to use. Yeah. If you are going to your doctor's office, like ask, what AI do you use? And can I opt out? And maybe get together with other patients, the nurses in the office, and ask, like, can we create guardrails around that too?
What does the US public do about big tech if it wants to take on some of these issues? Income inequality, regional inequality, global, imperial overreach, etc. A few proposals, and which somebody can execute on. What would you suggest?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's just the US public. I mean, anyone in the world can do something about it. And one of the remarkable things for me in reporting stories is people who felt like they had the least amount of agency in the world were actually the ones that put up the most aggressive fights and actually started gaining ground on these companies in taking resources from them. So I talk about Chilean water activists who pushed back against a Google data center project for so long that they've stalled that project now for 5 years. And they forced Google to come to the table and the Chilean government to come to the table. And now these residents are invited to comment every time there's a data center development proposal, which they then said it's not the end of the fight. Like, they still have to be vigilant. And at any moment, if they blink, something could happen. But anyone in the world, I think, has an active role to play in shaping the AI development trajectory. And the way that I think about it is the full supply chain of AI development. You have a bunch of resources that these companies need to develop their technologies: data, land, energy, water. And then you have a bunch of spaces that these companies need access to deploy their technologies: schools, hospitals, offices, government agencies. All these resources and all these spaces are actually places of democratic contestation. They're collectively owned. They're publicly owned. So we're already seeing artists and writers that are suing these companies saying, no, you cannot take our intellectual property. And that is them reclaiming ownership over a critical resource that these companies need. We're seeing people start exercising their data privacy rights. I mean, one of my favorite things about visiting the UK and EU as an American that has no federal data privacy law to protect me is to reject those cookies every single web page that I encounter. That is me reclaiming ownership over my data and not allowing those companies to then feed that into their models. We're seeing, just like the Chilean water activists, hundreds of communities now rising up and pushing back against data center development. We're seeing teachers and students escalate a public debate around, do we actually want AI in our schools? And if so, under what terms? And many schools are now setting up governance committees to determine what their AI policy is, so that ultimately AI can facilitate more curiosity and more critical thinking instead of just eroding it all away.
Facial recognition block, we're here to make a planet. Can't nobody stop it. Can't nobody stop it. Everyone turn on your facial recognition block, we're here to make a planet. Can't nobody stop it. Everyone turn on your facial recognition block, we're here to make a planet. Can't nobody stop it. Everyone turn on your facial recognition block, we're here to make a planet. Can't nobody stop it.